Dune Part 2 was directed by Denis Villeneuve and is the follow-up, as I'm sure you guys figured out, to Dune Part 1, the poster of which is right here. This is obviously a movie that a lot of people are very excited for, and it continues the story of Paul Atreides, played once again by Timothée Chalamet, as the story picks up right where Part 1 ended. He is now accepted with the Fremen, and he is living in the Siege with them, but they're also trying to figure out how to take on the Harkonnens and take back Arrakis for themselves, which is going to be a tough task because the Emperor Shaddam IV has a controlling hand on all of that. But eventually Paul is starting to accept his destiny of becoming the Lisan al-Gaib, which might mean that he has to take them on, himself and eventually lead the Fremen to victory, which may or may not be the nicest path depending on how that goes. Do you remember a moment of time in 2021 when there was no guarantee of this happening? There was a point when the first part came out and they said, we haven't greenlit part 2 yet. It's going to depend on the success of this one on the opening weekend. If people show up for it, then we'll see. If people stream it enough on HBO Max, then we have a chance. And then enough substantial streams and box office opening numbers later, just enough to make them go, yeah, I think we have a future over here. And now we're getting the sequel. But for a moment there, this was going to be an abrupt start. So I'm glad that that hasn't happened and we're getting to see this movie. I went to see it tonight in IMAX with a packed theater and naturally pumped out of my mind. I actually did something very insane, which was avoid everything for it. I didn't see a single trailer for Dune Part 2. I didn't even see one for Part 1, and I just figured, keep the trend going. So until tonight, I hadn't seen one frame of the movie. And I'm so glad that I did that because I loved the first movie. I think I love the second one even more, which is saying a lot because the first movie is one that I gave a very high rating. In fact, it ended up my #1 movie of that year. But I think the second one surpasses that in every single way. I think as far as blockbusters go or just big budget epics go, this is one of the finest I've ever seen. Dune Part 2 is a wonderfully done film, and it's a film that's just as visually spectacular as it is thematically very powerful. It takes elements of the first movie that seemed very underdone at first, and it develops on them in a gradual and in a very powerful way that manages to make all of the events that are going on feel like they have a little more resonance, which is important because Paul's entire journey is built on the idea of this is the fundamentalist way of going about it. This is what the prophecy says. There's religious fanaticism and followings involved with that. There's a cult status to that, which is building and building and building with the stories that are being passed on by the Bene Gesserit. And so because of that, the film manages to hone in on those as best as it can, and it does it very effectively. It also manages to offer the critique of just the fact that, Paul is not one of us. Neither is the Lady Jessica, Rebecca Ferguson. They're outsiders. And the idea that they're the ones who are leading us into this, that may or may not be the best way to go about it because it becomes more about themselves and what they want rather than what we want. And the fact that the film manages to handle those heavy-handed elements as best as it does and as impactfully as it does is a credit to the writing from Denis Villeneuve and John Spates. I think they've done a fantastic job with the screenplay over here. But Villeneuve's direction is a master to behold. It's entirely filmed in IMAX, this one, and the scale is impeccable. Every sequence which involves something very action-packed, which is a lot more in this movie compared to the first one, similar to the book, which is where all the stuff really happens in that last 200 pages, and that's mostly what you get with this movie over here. All of that stuff is done in such a brilliant way. There are sequences that are going to be living with you for a long time. You're going to think about it over and over again with the incredible sound design, fantastic, impeccable, flawless CGI, which is then on display, the beautiful cinematography by Greg Fraser, who once again ups his game. I think he is one of the best cinematographers that we have right now. All the stuff that he's done so far, this man just understands how to make a big scale epic. And he once again continues to deliver. Hans Zimmer's score somehow tops the first one, which he won the Oscar for. So that should tell you everything you need to know. Another amazing score. I cannot wait to own this thing. I mean, it's going to be something that is replayed and replayed. And it's a much darker score as well. It takes elements of the first movie and it twist them in certain ways depending on what's happening, which I'm not going to go too much into. And it also leads to some fantastic performances. In fact, I want to go on record and say this is the best I've seen Timothée Chalamet. There's a point in the movie where Paul switches and you start to see the side of him that is the Lisan al-Gaib. And that version of him, as it becomes more and more prominent, the performance that he gives is incredible. And he is outstanding over here, really. There are some moments with him. There's one scene in particular where he's talking to the Fremen. And I'm not going to spoil anything. You're going to know what scene it is. You're going to be transfixed by the man's performance. It is genuinely amazing. Zendaya, once again, is also really, really great, as is Rebecca Ferguson. Javier Bardem is having a great time over here. He's very good in the movie as well. And much of the returning cast, like Stellan Skarsgård, Josh Brolin, they're all really great too. The one big addition to this movie is Faye Rauta, played by Austin Butler, as well as Florence Pugh and Christopher Walken as Princess Irulan and Emperor Shaddam IV. I think Austin Butler as Faye Rauta is incredibly menacing. This is one of those things where the original version in the books, yeah, there's a menace and psychotic nature to the character, and it's represented very, very well in this movie. The sequence where you're first introduced to him on Gedi Prime, they did this very cool thing where they make the whole place black and white because of the black sun, and it's really awesome. And so you get to see this guy's viciousness on full display. It's an amazing scene and looks spectacular in IMAX, which I cannot stress enough. If you're gonna go see this movie, please go see it in IMAX. Everybody else, like Florence Pugh and Christopher Walken, I thought they were really good too. And they did a very good job in the moments that they had on screen. Which, if you remember the books, there's a bigger role, you know, for one of those characters in what's to come, which is something that I should mention, because Dune's story, for Paul Atreides at least, is the first and the second book. So there is another story in here. This was always going to be a trilogy once that part 2 got greenlit. And I'm assuming Messiah's on the way, but there's going to be a while before that. But I hope that people understand, like, this one ends in a way that definitely sets up another storyline. So there is another chapter to this. But regardless of that, I think the first book, Frank Herbert's first novel, is adapted perfectly. I think the first part did a great job. I think the second part did an even better job. And I am in absolute awe of this movie. I could talk about it on and on, but frankly, at this point, I just want to get you guys to go to the theater. And you're gonna go anyway. I mean, this is a movie that has been highly anticipated for a while. But it really does deliver on every single front. It manages to be, again, like I mentioned, a very spectacular in terms of a visual sense. And it also manages to do great with its themes and its characters, and it manages to pull off a very well-rounded experience. And at 2 hours and 46 minutes, never feels like 2 hours and 46 minutes. This thing moves at a very, very good pace. And that's something that is important, especially because the first half, there's a lot of building up going on. You need some time to sit with these characters and see what their different journeys are. I love the exploration of them and the Fremen and their culture, the way that it's shown, you know, the fact that there's that scare, once again, like I mentioned, that is wonderfully realized. So just go see it. just go see the movie. I'm too excited to give more thoughts right now. But it is by far, I mean, the best movie of the year so far, which is great because so far 2024 has been okay, but 2024 now, I feel like we're kicking off. We finally got the first legitimately great movie of the year. And I'm so glad it was this one. And I'm gonna give Dune Part 2 a very well-deserved 10 out of 10. As a fan of the books and as a fan of that story, I'm just very happy right now. I'm so happy. I can't wait to, you know, put this up. I'm gonna be listening to the soundtrack over and over again once this is done. I'm very satisfied as a moviegoer right now. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very, very soon. If you got to see Dune Part 2 tonight, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I will see you guys at the movies.